Everything that we do, from our customer evaluations to the technology that we build to the roadmaps that we have, everything converges with one thing in mind, and that's to serve you, the customer.
Sharewell provides enterprise power without the cost and complexity.
I've got a system that I can customize with little training.
Never have to write a line of code and never need a developer level resource to touch the tool.
Having this portal and being able to integrate it with our existing SharePoint sites and being able to provide on-demand reports and searches.
Anything that you can conceive of that you need to automate and integrate, you can build.
Within days of receiving the product, it was plugged into our virtual environment.
It's a game changer.
Most of our competition, you'll find out, is built on old legacy technology.
We can get you up and running as quickly as possible, and yet you'll never outgrow us.
Our software and our technology was built on the latest, most innovative technology available today.
Whether you have it on-premise and bring it into our hosted environment, or take it from our hosted environment and bring it on-premise, it doesn't matter.
It's about people at Sharewell. It's in the relationships that we build.
At the end of the meeting, he turned to me and he says, "You guys have got the deal." And I said, "Well, why? What made the difference?" And he says, "It's the way Sharewell treated us."
We don't get it right every time. We listened, we identified the problem, and then we worked through the solution together.
You need to be worried about your legacy. Your legacy is based upon the tools and the people that you employ and how cost effective and what the quality is. So keeping this simple and not expensive and easy to maintain saves you a lot.
Hello, my name is Mark Fay from Sharewell Software. We're a proud sponsor of TFT 2014, bringing great ITSM content to the world. Please enjoy this next presentation.
Hello and good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you happen to be in the world. If you have been listening or watching these presentations all the way through, one, I'd say you're lying. Secondly, I would say, thank you. If you're truly not lying, thank you for holding on and wading through this entire series of 24 hours of presentation. This is the second to last. There is one additional presentation coming after mine, and I hope you're excited about it. I'm excited to be here with you today. My name is Dan Kane. I am a IT service management consultant with ServiceNow, and we are here today to talk about stories and how they can be utilized within your metrics reporting. Nothing quite as exciting in the service management world than metrics. If you're like me, you look at metrics as being one of the most exciting things you do on a day-to-day basis. So I want to start off with a quick story to give you a little bit of background. While I am currently while I now work for ServiceNow as a consultant, I spent almost 20 years as a practitioner in the service management world, even before I knew what I was doing was called service management. And I love statistics. I love stats. I'm a baseball nerd. I can tell you that the last time a major league player hit 400 in a full season was Ted Williams in 1941. He also won the home run crown that year, and yet he didn't win the league MVP because a guy named Joe DiMaggio hit in 56 straight games. I like my stats. I like that. It's, I have fun with that. It's something that I enjoy both professionally and personally. Well, I was coming into a meeting a few years ago, with my other management peers and the senior director of our group, so my boss, in this meeting as well. And we were going to have a pretty big discussion around staff utilization and capacity. And I came armed to the teeth with data. I had my sheets. I had several spreadsheets worth to share with everybody about the actual data. What the meeting ended up being was almost an intervention of sorts on me to help me see that the perceptions of my staff and how they needed to be doing more within the organization. I kept coming back with showing him the sheet saying, but the data shows this, but the data shows that. And what I was getting in response was shared observations that appeared to be contradicting what I was saying was in the data. It was incredibly frustrating to me. I will tell you that I was getting extremely frustrated because, I don't want to live in a world where data doesn't matter. To me, statistics are everything. But it hit me after a little while that I was not entirely right and they were not entirely wrong. Now, I will tell you, to this day, I will tell you that I believe that I was right in the ultimate point. However, in my frustrations, what I realized is that the others had a better narrative, and we call that a story. What they had was their personal observations that appeared to fit our bosses, the senior director, our boss's experience and perceptions. My data, even though I had all this data, did not fit her perceptions and her personal experiences. The stories that the others gave did. So even though I had numbers and data, and we all love numbers and data to back it up, I'm finding is that when it comes to decision making, personal experiences will win out over straight data every time. So with that story in mind, I want to switch over to, I'm going to take just a moment to switch over to my presentation around metrics and storytelling. So, and then we'll be going through each of these items in pretty good detail. But I want to start off with just a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I've been doing IT and IT-related work, whether it be teaching, computer training, leading help desks, leading support operations, infrastructure groups. But what I love most about my job and any work that I've done historically is when I get to be kind of a technology and management coach or mentor. I really do love that part of the job. I've been engaged in several different parts of the business world. As you can see, I love my process improvement. I love metrics. I am very passionate about customer experience. I provide lots of content. I blog. I'm online socially on social media. So certainly please check out my Hazy ITSM on Twitter. Just simply Dan Kane on G+ and LinkedIn. But also at my blog at hazyitsm.com. You'll find that a lot of these themes come up. So we're talking about metrics, and we all love data. So what I want to say, when we talk about this, we say that metrics, they really exist to do two things. They help us to make decisions, and they drive action. Now we want things to drive action in staff. You can go back to the old management standard of, people will pay attention to what is measured, to what they know their boss is paying attention to. And if their boss is paying attention to measurements, that's what they will pay attention to as well. But it also helps make decisions. So it guides decisions within the business. And that's what it's really about. Now I'll give you another little anecdote here about kind of the following up on my but the data shows experience. I have credibility to talk about metrics and stories, both, because I love them both. And I can try to create that credibility by telling you that, hey, I have a master's degree in communication studies, and so that makes me an expert. Or I can tell you stories. I can tell you stories about how we can apply metrics in a story context, which will demonstrate competency better. I've heard several of the presentations over the last several hours talking about demonstrating competency. The last presentation even talked quite a bit about how interviewers are looking at, competency-based interview questions. More and more often we know it's the demonstration of competency, that's that personal experiences and observations, will win out over hard factual data all the time. I have a master's degree in communication studies. yeah, big deal. So the story will win almost every time. So why? Well, we know that paper credentials can be meaningless, and we've had lots of experiences that we have shared with each other that tell us paper credentials mean nothing. We'll come back to that point in just a little bit, but that's the point I wanted to make here right now. Most importantly, or I can't say most importantly, but an important point to make is we have personal experiences and observations. When we don't have personal experiences and observations around a topic area, stories become experience by proxy. We experience a context, we experience a concept, we experience the paper credentials meaning nothing, maybe less through our own experience, but more through the stories that we hear others share. That's what we hear a lot about. So let me go onto the right spot here. And I want to follow up on that concept a little bit here too, talking about experiences and perceptions and why they are so powerful. I had a new CFO came into an organization that I was working for several years ago. One of the first comments he made was, "Wow, we have a big IT group here." And when your finance guy, who by the way, IT reported up to the finance people, up to the CFO, when one of the first observations they have coming in is, "We have a really big group here," start to get a little bit concerned about the perceived sense of how important your staff is within an organization. But you certainly get a sense of this CFO's background, what his experiences were like coming in. Another example that you may hear from time to time, that I know I've heard from time to time, is, whenever I walk by the help desk, I see a bunch of people standing around or sitting around and chit-chatting socially. That's that can make for a strong sense of perspective or perception on the value of your help desk or service desk. Now, that person may not know that the supposed chit chat that's going on is really the various technicians talking to each other, finding out what's going on. So they might be finding out about changes that are coming up in the environment soon and learning a little bit more about it. It might seem like a social chit chat, but it might be something that's very relevant to the job. But the point is that it's their perception, it's their experience. We're going to have a really hard time trying to convince them of something different. And that's the point I make here in this quote from Stephen Denning, who is a management guru, and he specifically talks a lot about stories and organizational stories. Giving reasons for change to people who don't agree with you isn't just ineffective. There is a significant body of research that shows that it actually entrenches people more deeply in opposition to what you are proposing. So if I just try to give you reasons, in this group, when I was saying, but the data shows, all that was doing was entrenching the people I was talking to in their opposition to what I was trying to tell them, the point I was trying to make. That's a really important point to think about. So let me make sure I'm on the right spot here and where I'm good on. Yep, timing is going well. So as we said, metrics exist to do two things: help make decisions and drive action. And they can't drive action unless we know what the perspectives, what the perceptions of the people that we're working with are. We need to know who the decision makers are and what their perceptions are. So one point I want to talk about a little bit is the idea that objective data on its own is not enough. Now, I've blogged about this a few times. I've gotten some feedback from folks saying, I think getting the impression that I was saying that objective data wasn't important. And I want to make it really, really clear that objective data, statistics, the facts, are very, very important. However, facts alone will not drive action. Statistics do not drive action. Again, we go up with that whole concept of the data shows versus the personal experiences of the CFO or someone else, what they've experienced. We act on truths, not facts. So what we have is stories plus the statistics plus the objective data become truth. We act on truths, not facts. And if you think about that in your own life, that is true almost 100% of the time. You might say that you act on fact all the time, but in the reality, you are acting on facts in the context of something that you believe to be a larger truth. And we'll give you an example of that. From a lecture series called The Art of Storytelling from the Great Courses series. This Dr. Harvey, quote from Dr. Hannah Harvey is, and I love this quote, "Facts are what happened. Truths are about what those happenings meant to people." We don't know what the facts mean unless we put it in the context of people. So we can get the context of people. We can get the context of people through observations. So we observe how people react or work with the facts, or we can get examples through stories. And that's one of the main points I want to make with this, is how stories can act as a proxy for our own personal experiences. If I don't have personal experiences in, let's say, for example, being audited by the IRS, I am going to want to hear the stories of what other people say. Reading the data, reading facts about it, about, 9 out of 10 have no problem going through an audit in the IRS. I want to hear the stories. I want to know what's going on. So I'll give you another example currently in the news. The Congressional Budget Office here in the U.S. Came out recently within the last 2 weeks with their, it's been called the Obamacare Report. The CBO is a nonpartisan organization that is connected to the U.S. Congress to give primarily financial reports that are as neutrally faced as possible. So what I wanted to throw out here is several of the reactions that we've seen out in the world. So the Chicago Tribune saying that there are two sides to Obamacare, but only one is factual. Forbes magazine, the CBO, Obamacare is a tax on work. Obamacare doesn't kill jobs, from CNN. The CBO tells Republicans they're all wet on Obamacare, from Los Angeles Times. Obamacare's war on jobs, a reality, from the Boston Herald. Truth of CBO Obamacare report, a win-win for Americans. But the point is that there was the same set of factual data that each one of these organizations were commenting on. And most of these are, some of these are editorial, some of these are actually within the news article headline, not the editorial opinion headline. So this is an interesting perspective on how perceptions and our own experiences will create a truth that is based upon our perceptions and the facts of a situation. I love data, as I said before. This is the way many of us like to report in IT service management. We've historically reported on our data. Now, for example, I have the top part of the screen is the count of tickets or incidents opened on a month-by-month basis. Oh, I just loved this. This is just exciting to me and showing how the volume was changing over time. But it doesn't tell me anything. I tried to make it say something. I had some comments in there. This was from many, many years ago. This is the way we frequently report when we send reports out and just say, hey, we had a 26% increase in tickets between February and March. Wow. This was probably the one I was most proud of, where we could show the volume of tickets of the different severities against how long it took to close, how many average days to close. And so I could see trends. So For example, the moderate or the standard ticket had, oh, look at that, had a big increase in March in the number of incidents we did, and we had an average we have a decrease in the average lifespan of the moderate tickets. So that's the green. So the green line is the volume. The green bar on the right side of the screen, 2.8 days per average ticket, is a pretty big decrease from what it was in February. Now, I would look at these and say, we are doing great. What does it mean? Does it allow us to make decisions? Does it drive action? No, it is purely a rear view window perspective and really gives us nothing. I want to take a look at some other legacy metrics. And I'm just going to ask, what do these mean? We have things like first contact resolution, availability, mean time to repair, number of incidents, increase and decrease. And you might say that, well, those stats I was showing you are really old from many years ago. I can tell you that I have clients right now that have their business goal, their service improvement goal for this calendar year is to see an overall decrease in incidents by 2% or by X percent. They're still showing that. I've overheard clients talking about their first contact resolution at 95%, and I would ask questions like, okay, 95% of what? What does that mean? And what I was finding is that about 60% of all incidents were actually addressed outside of the help desk with direct contacts to other parts of IT or indirect through the IT portal. Not a bad thing if we are able to bypass the help desk and get right to a technician. If the business says that's the right thing to do, that's great. But we need a context. We need to understand the context for these metrics. First contact resolution means nothing if there isn't a context for it. So when we don't have context, my point around all these metrics that decisions are based on the most compelling story that accompanies the metric. So when I talk about the compelling story, pardon me, I get caught up in my notes here for just a moment. What we mean is, honestly, all decisions are based on data. There is data of some sort involved in the decision-making process. So what this tells me is, okay, availability is at 97% this month. It doesn't by itself allow me to make a decision. So instead, I'll take those numbers, those statistics that I hear. I'll take some personal experiences. You know, I've heard the director of marketing talking about some real challenges when her staff is out in the field and they really struggle with getting connected in through the VPN system. Why don't, have we really seriously looked into cloud-based solutions that will maybe allow us to bypass the VPN? That's leading towards decisions based upon personal experiences instead of a combination of data or statistics and the experience and trying to create shared experiences. So decisions are based on the most compelling story that accompanies the metrics. So, and going back to my original example with the team that I was working with my peers, talking about staffing issues and who's doing the most work, who's the busiest and all that, the decisions were made against me because others had the more compelling story. Even if I had metrics, their story was more compelling to the decision maker. So we're talking about metrics again. We want to use metrics to make decisions and drive action. We know that we act and make decisions on truths, not facts, and that's based upon stories plus the objective data can equal truths. Now, I'm saying stories here. You could also say it's also the personal experiences, the observations, and stories. plus the objective data equals truth. What we're talking about here, though, is how we can use stories to create a shared truth. So stories allow us to create shared truths. That's what we're looking for here. So stories can create experiences. So or they can alter experiences in some cases. So if I have a story or a set of stories to offset the CFO's perspective of, wow, we have a really big IT group here. If I can use stories to offset that, and the stories that will be relevant to that CFO. What's going to be relevant to a CFO? Generally, money. It's dollars that's going to matter. So I'm going to have a story based upon our cost benefit, so the benefit that is received in the business, and I want to consistently repeat that story. Another example I'm giving here is I talked briefly a little bit ago about how the fact that, hey, I have credibility to talk about this because I have a master's degree in communication studies. Kind of feel like anyone who might, I remember from years ago, there was Ask Dr. Science. I think that was on public radio here in the U.S. One of my favorite elements of that, one of the things I remember the most from that was they would always have the little tagline that would say, ask Dr. Science. Dr. Science is not a real doctor. And he would come in and his voice would pop in and saying, I have a master's degree in science. Well, I have a master's degree in communications. So that means I am more credible because of that. Or am I more credible because of hands-on experience that I have in storytelling or in demonstrating how I can tell stories to you? If I polled the audience listening here, I think I would see pretty clearly a show of hands. You can all raise your hands. I can see a show of hands that would say, yeah, it looks about 80% believe that hands-on experience or the ability to demonstrate the skill set is going to have more credibility. It's better. Well, why is that? Why is that the case? Why do we consider that the experience, why do we believe experience is better than credentials? Well, we've heard stories. We have heard shared stories. We've had stories that others share about people with paper credentials only. You certainly hear that. Boy, I remember going through a horrific exchange upgrade with a previous company when the consultant that came in to help us with that exchange upgrade, the consultant was suggesting all these really odd things, but we didn't know that we didn't know that, for example, turning on certain settings on the clients at all times would be a bad idea. He told us it was a great idea. You want to always have people running in offline mode, or with Exchange. With Exchange, one of the things we found out over the last several years is the offline, is that the synchronization of Exchange with your local client is not always great. But what this consultant was telling us is everybody, desktops, laptops, whoever, should be running in synchronization mode with Exchange. And what we found out was that it was a terrible idea. It was creating all kinds of unnecessary traffic and was creating pain for especially the executives who would, the executives of the various business units talk to the CIO. The CIO talks to the various IT managers saying, hey, Joe Schmo, our VP of sales, he and his admin assistant are getting conflicts all the time and looking at their Outlook calendars. Well, after doing a little digging into it, we found because it was almost entirely due to this mode we were having all of our clients run in. It was a story about a terrible consultant who had book knowledge but not hands-on experience. That's a story. We understand stories. They get shared. We hear other people share similar stories. You know, I had this ITIL consultant come in and tell us that we had, and tell us exactly how we had to do things. That it was critically important that the help desk be the starting point for all IT contacts. And what we found is that really just wasn't appropriate in our business's context, in our culture. Our culture was such so that there was a real distrust of what would happen to their ticket, what would happen to their request if they went to the help desk first. We don't want that. We certainly don't want the help desk being considered a bad place to go. But the worst way to try to change that perception is to force people to use that option exclusively. So the consultant came in and told the group to say, what we need to do is make sure that everybody is using the service desk, instead of looking at the reasons for why the service desk was not being used. Terrible, terrible experience. So we have all these experiences that tell us paper credentials are bad. Personal experience in implementing these things are much better. Well, what's even better than that is a combination of the two. So we know that, again, coming back to our ITSM metrics, we want to make decisions. We want to drive action. We want to look at truths, not facts. And again, reinforcing that I don't mean that truths are in place of facts, but facts help create truths in the context of stories. So we can come to the whole point now, kind of one of the main points of this is, how do we tell stories with metrics? Can we change what others hold as truth? So pardon me, I have to jump through my slides here. I apologize. User error on my part. So I have credibility in telling stories, but not so much in using Prezi. So it's a neat tool. I just got to make sure that it's more than just a neat tool. I apologize for making you car sick there. So hopefully we'll be a little more steady, have a little more steady cam for you going forward. So yeah, can we change what others hold as truth? The CFO that says, wow, this is a big IT organization. The senior director that says, the support team, the service desk is just not busy enough. They need, we need them to be able to do more, that they're not doing their jobs. So yes, the good news is, yes, we can change what others hold as truth, but not through facts alone. We have to create new personal experiences. We need to replace their existing experiences and observations with new ones. Really, so there are really only two ways to do that. We can manufacture the new experience. We can certainly have we can change the help desk habits and make sure that any conversations that they're having that are not related to taking phone calls are held away from the help desk area. That could be manufacturing a new experience. But the other way we do that, and can be much more, can be much more time sensitive, is to create these new experiences via stories as proxy. So stories as a proxy for personal experiences. And as you think about it, that's really how we share how we share experiences in life, as we share stories with each other, and that makes for shared experiences. So I spent a lot of time looking at what makes for a good story, and ironically, the two of the most interesting and most compelling people I found talking about this were both from Disney Pixar studios. One was Andrew Stanton, who has directed several of the Pixar movies that we've all come to know and love. Another is a name that's not as well known, Emma Coates. She has become a filmmaker on her own, but she has since left Pixar. She tweeted, I believe back in 2012, tweeted a series of 22 tweets of 22 concepts or 22 components of what makes a great story. And Andrew Stanton provided a great TED talk on what makes a great story. I took just a few of the things that I thought was most relevant to the IT metrics perspective and broke it down into just a couple of examples here of what makes for a great story. So a great story must create a shared experience. It has to make shareholders care. It has to make the stakeholders in the decision-making process care. Every element must lead to a singular goal. In Finding Nemo, the title helped. What was the singular goal? Finding Nemo. There might have been some subplots, but every one of those subplots still led to the singular goal. We need to know the ending before figuring out the middle. And I want to speak briefly to that last one. Know the ending before figuring out the middle does not mean that we need to predetermine the desired outcome first. So, for example, my predetermined outcome was to demonstrate that the help desk was actually picking up all the new technologies that they needed to not just as quickly, but more quickly than the business was expecting them to. That was my desired outcome. That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I mean by knowing the ending. What I mean by that is knowing what decisions should be made based upon the outcome. So, going back up to the top, I'll come through these in somewhat of an order. Creating a shared experience. We know that good stories create a shared experience. Management guru Jim Collins is well known for his ability to get us to get corporate boardrooms to come to. Pardon me here. Let's see. Pardon me while I find the right spot. So yeah, we want to create a shared experience. And Jim Collins, the management guru who's written books like Great by Choice, Good to Great, Built to Last, Something to Something, shares the common. They all share the common theme of presenting research results through stories of the companies that did something well and the companies that did not do something well. Now, you can certainly argue about his findings or even his methodologies for getting to those findings, but you cannot argue with the book sales and the impact that his research and that his findings have had on corporate boardrooms and C-suites and boardrooms. It's undeniable. He has created experiences in areas where most people don't have their own personal experiences. I don't have, as a CEO, I don't have personal experience in making my company produce profits of 15% year over year for 20 years. I don't have that experience. He uses research, he uses statistics, he uses facts, and then makes it a story about the business and about the business that succeeded and about the businesses that either did not succeed or succeeded less well. So it's the whole idea of creating a shared experience by a good story. That's what a good story will do, is create that shared experience. We have to make the stakeholders or shareholders care. So for that, I want to look at a fairly common metric that we use in IT service management: incidents caused by change. So what we want to look at is, frequently we'll look at the percentage of changes that generated major incidents or any incidents at all. I used to have, years ago, I'd have a service desk group. I'd have a lead on the service desk for every change record in our system would identify whether it had no impact, minor impact, or major impact on incidents. So, and so we would track all that information. So, but let's say we're looking at, okay, what is the pure volume of incidents caused by change? Have they gone up or down? Well, standing alone, what does this metric say? If the incidents caused by change are going up, well, maybe it shows a percentage, but what action can we take? What action or decision can we make as a result of that data? Without context, we can look for several different responses. And this is where you want to get into that whole idea of, does it matter? Do I care? Because right now, when I just look at the data by itself, I don't know if I'm supposed to care. So your service desk manager may say something like, changes are going in without proper vetting and testing, and all these changes are being messed up. You have an application development, maybe the development manager saying, we got to figure out why the service desk is creating so many incidents. Or you have an IT operations director that says, who is responsible for this? Because, of course, an increase in incidents caused by changes is a bad thing. Well, then you might, and finally gets all the way up to the CIO, who is just sitting at her desk snoring, looking at this data. She's just shuffling through the papers and see, okay, whatever, throw it away. So who has the appropriate response? Well, it's the CIO. And, not just because she's the boss. The reality is that the metric, we have an increase in the number of incidents caused by changes. The metric means nothing. It means nothing at all, and without context, without a reason to make the shareholder care, which is really kind of sad, since there may actually be something to address in this situation. The reality is that the CIO may well initiate some sort of action, but not until she hears a compelling story to accompany the metric. And you'll notice we have different perspectives already on what that might mean. So let's talk a little bit about the singular goal. Every element must lead to a singular goal. You want to say that that's very important. And singular goal or know the ending. So I'm kind of talking about both of these at the same time. Malcolm Fry, who is one of the luminaries in our industry, really one of the great minds that has dealt with metrics for years and years in IT service management. He created, or he didn't create, but he really expanded into the IT world this perspective of service focal point. So the idea is that we have all these great KPIs, we have all these critical success factors, the CSFs in service management, but on their own, they really don't mean much of anything. What we need to have is a service focal point. What is the reason that, what is the decision that we're trying to make? What is the action that we're trying to, that we are trying to take, or that we need to, what action do we need to take as a result of these KPIs and CSFs that we are collecting? We need a singular goal. Equally important is the concept of being consistent in what and how we report it. The singular goal must remain consistent from reporting period to reporting period. You might tweak the calculation that goes into the singular goal, but it still is the same goal. And that's where I want to get into that, knowing the ending. The goal, the point might be, and here's some examples of what you can use. Do we need more service desk staff? Will the proposed process changes enable greater margins? Are we on track to meet annual goals? Did something happen yesterday that we need to address? How will we know whether initiative XYZ is successful? I ask that question frequently within my clients, and frequently get a blank stare back in response. So we need to have that singular goal, and we need to know what the question is we're trying to answer. And that's part of the story. It's a story of, are we on track to meet annual goals? So, and I'm going to wrap up with an example around continual service improvement. That's a very common goal you hear out there, right? You see out there right now. Frequently today, however, and we still come across, especially in the ITIL or IT service management world, where Continual service improvement equals process improvement or siloed process improvements. So we're working on making mean time to repair less. We're working on bringing down increasing our availability percentages. Those are all really good things. They are. However, it's also possible for us to overdo process improvement without actually improving our services overall. So how often do you see measurement efforts around incident resolution time? How does that indicate service improvement in and of itself? So does the business care about the timeliness of incident resolutions? Well, maybe, but only in the context of productivity and thereby cost, loss, or savings. So we want to look at, maybe one thing we look at is what kind of incidents are causing the greatest productivity loss. So when I do this, I like to look at, does the, up on the screen, does the service provide business value? Yes or no? The point that process improvement does not in and of itself equal business value. Process metrics are always part of the story. They really are. They're not the story, but they're part of the story. And the story should provide meaning, going back to that original concept of truth is what the facts meant. So one of the things when we look at something like business value, all I want to know is there increased revenue? Are we decreasing costs? Are we increasing goodwill? Are we improving corporate strategic outcomes, or are we mitigating risk exposure? Really, if you think about it, these are the 5 elements of value for any business. So if you are not driving value, if you are not doing something positive in one of these 5 areas, your metrics are not telling a story, and they're not providing value to your business. We can also talk about the whole concept of providing meaning. Who is the protagonist? Is it the customer? Is it the internal customer? Is it the line of business executive? Is it the CX C-suite? I want to take a look at an example. I'm running a little bit short on time, so I want to go quickly to an example. This is just one example of the perspective of how we can use this concept of value. So we might look at the services that we offer to a business and have an index score. And that we have a score that we can compare our value against each of these various services on a quarter-by-quarter basis. So we have production services. We know that it's improved. We know that we've seen improvement on a quarter-to-quarter basis. We know that in our operational excellence around our cost savings and efficiencies, we've had a pretty big drop in our overall value in that service. But the idea is we're telling a story. In one screen, we're telling a story, and we're providing some context for that story. I am just about out of time, so I want to wrap up on the one of the points I really want you to take away from this is that don't get too hung up on the actual formulas that are used to create this sort of index. Have this sort of index, have an idea of what the story is, what the question is, what is the outcome, and make sure that outcome matters to your audience, to whether it's the C-suite or other IT managers. Don't get hung up on the actual formula. The point is how we move the focus of ITSM metrics away from these siloed numbers that mean nothing on their own to information that tells a compelling story. I am going to briefly jump back and see if there are questions. I don't see questions out here right now, so I want to I will wrap up and say thank you to TFT for the time that you've given me. I really appreciate the time that has been given to us to present this, and look forward to any feedback you may have. I have the feedback information to follow me on my blog and on Twitter, and I will hopefully speak to some of you later.